Today, I'm going to demonstrate the sample practical test for the 5ICW. So if you go to the Learn site, you should be able to find the sample practical as part of the very last session. So that's the PowerShell continued section. So if we click on that section, it will take us here, and here's the sample practical test. Click on this and save it, and you should be able to open it up, and this is what it looks like. So this is the sample practical test to hopefully get you ready for the actual practical test. You can see the first few bits just highlight the competencies associated with the subject, but the most important thing is to actually have the right virtual machine and the following sections. So here it says to download these two virtual machines. These are basically the same virtual machines that we've been using for the whole subject, and it's nothing different. So it's the same virtual machines. So if we actually have a check, so on my computer here, I've downloaded the Server 2016 VMs and the Windows 10 VM to my C downloads folder. All right, so I might as well start. So I'll open them up. So first of all, if you look at this section, it says create a folder called Homes on the C drive. And obviously, if you don't realize, this is going to be where your home folder for your users are going to be. Okay, so let's open up the virtual machine. So here, we'll press Control O to open. We'll browse to our Server 2012, Server 2016 Server 1, and we'll reset this to the snapshot W2K 121680.local. Okay, so basically that is where the server has been installed with Active Directory, and that's it. Okay, with Active Directory installed, nothing else. We'll open up the Windows 10 as well while we're here, and we'll reset that to the appropriate snapshot as well, and then we'll put that into the Windows 10 Client 1. That's basically a standalone Windows 10 client machine, not part of a domain or anything like that, and that's where we're going to be starting from. So let's start our Server 2016. So I'm going to close this up. I'm going to make this screen like this, so you can see that I'm adapting it so that's half-half. So it's going to be half my test paper and half the actual virtual machine. So that way I can see what I'm doing. So I'm just waiting for it to turn on, and while that's happening, I might also turn on my Windows 10 computer. And if you're prompted as to whether you copied it or moved it, the big important difference is that if you choose I moved it, it will keep the same MAC address. Okay, that may not be important for most parts of the 5ICW subject, but I recommend you choose I copy it anyway. By choosing I copy it, it changes your MAC address. Whereas if you choose I moved it, it maintains the same MAC address. And obviously, if you're gonna have two virtual machines participate on the same physical network or shared network, and they have the same MAC address, that's going to cause problems. So I'm going to log into my Server 1 by Control-Alt-Insert in the virtual machine, and the password should be just password 1, as we all know. And obviously, if it's asking you to change your password, especially if it's in the test, just change it to password 2. Otherwise, and tell your lecturer. Otherwise, your password, your lecturer may not be able to log in if it's anything different, or they don't know your password. So make sure your lecturer knows what your password is. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my C drive of my server, and I'm going to create a folder called my surname. Okay, so that is where all our file system associated with this test will be located. So in my root of my C drive, I'm going to right click, new folder. And this is, for me, it's going to be my surname, Zhao. And inside of this, if you look, inside of this folder, create a folder called home. And this is where our users' home directory will be kept. Okay, so home. All right, so that's part 1 done. Part 2. in your Active Directory. So to create an organizational unit called your surname. So obviously, just to keep things nice and tidy, we're going to put all the things we create for this particular test inside of an organizational unit called our surname. So to work with Active Directory, I like to use the Active Directory users and computers, and I can launch that from the Server Manager tools, Active Directory users and computers. Here we go. So in my domain, create an organizational unit called my surname. So selecting the domain, I can go to the right area and right click and go new organizational unit, or I can just simply select that and click on this create new organizational unit tool, or I can right click on the domain itself and go new organizational unit. But to be honest, it doesn't matter which option or which method you actually choose to use. So I'm going to call this OU ZAL again. So everything else I'll create in my Active Directory will be inside of this. You notice that this checkbox is automatically checked, and that's to protect from accidental deletion. So for our purposes, it's just more convenient to have this unchecked. All right, so that we've done that part, so we might just actually change those colors to red, so we know we've done them. Now we're going to create organizational units called Office Administration, Finance, and Directors. They're all different. They're various different departments for our fictitious organization. So we're going to put it inside of our OU we've just created for our surname. So we're going to create new organizational units. So Office Admin. So strictly speaking, you don't have to call exactly what specifies in the test, but as long as it makes some sort of sense. So Office Admin instead of Office Administration. You notice that I put the underscore here. The underscore just allows me not to use a space character. Okay, so when we're working with scripts or command line, the space character can cause some problems if you're not careful. So we'll click OK to that. And also, we're going to create another organizational unit called Finance. And you notice I've been unchecking the protect against accidental deletion all the time. And finally, Directors. All right, so we've got our 3 organizational units created. All right, next it says inappropriate OUs create the following computer accounts. Okay, so obviously which are the appropriate organizational units. So if it's not obvious, OA stands for Office Administration, F stands for Finance, and D stands for Directors. So Office Admin, we need 2 computer accounts. So if you've never done this before, select the container or the organizational unit you want to be in. On the right hand side, it'll show the contents, and right now there's nothing. So what I have to do is right click, new, and the object is a computer object. So what does this mean? This means this is actually creating a computer object for a computer to join the domain with the same name, and it will exist, or in Active Directory, it will exist in this organizational unit. So it's going to be called OA01 for one of them. And we've got another one, so new computer OA02. And we also have a F01 for accounting, finance, F01 for finance, F01, and we've got a D01 for directors. All right, so that's just pretty simple. So the next point here, so we'll again color these red so we know we've finished. The next part, it says rename your Windows 10 VM to your surname 01 and put it into the directors OU. Okay, so we'll go to the Windows 10. So obviously, before we can actually put into the directors OU, we need to actually log into, we need to actually add it to the domain, and then we will have a computer object. So we'll log in as a user with password 1 as the password. This is a local user which has administrative powers on this local computer. And obviously we know this from our studies during the semester or term that we need to actually give it an IP address, because by default any computer will have its IP address configured via DHCP, and that's why it says yes. But right now there's no DHCP server, so it's not getting a correct IP address. It's getting a people IP address. So to give it a static IP address, we go to the properties of the TCP/IP settings of the network interface card, and we give it an IP address. Well, we will use the same one we've been using all term. We do not have a gateway, but the DNS is critically important. So no DNS, no Active Directory. So if we get this wrong, it will never be able to join to our domain. So we'll click OK to all of that. So if I was a little bit fast there, it's only because that we've been doing that quite a bit, and you can always rewind and replay that section. So the easiest way to confirm that we have done everything correctly is to ping our server, which should have 192.168.20.2 as its IP address, and we can ping. Okay, if we couldn't ping at this stage, then we would have to check some of the settings and make sure they're all correct. To actually join the domain, there's a couple of ways of doing it. The easiest way, the way I personally like to do it is just to go to this computer and right-click Properties, go to the name, computer name, which has the name and the work group, and I like to change the settings. And it gets me the same spot basically. So if I click change, I can change the computer name. First of all, it's going to be my surname 01. Oops. And secondly, it's going to be part of the w2k16ad.local domain. I'll click OK to that. And obviously, if everything else is correct, I should be prompted with a login. And the user account with sufficient power right now to join this computer to the domain is the administrator user. And I will put in their password. Okay, so this is done. And that's all good for now. And we'll restart this computer, this Windows 10 computer. And we'll go back to our server. And as you know, when a computer joins a domain where it doesn't have a computer account already, it gets placed into the computer's container. Okay, so you can't see it right now, but if I refresh, you can see there it is. Okay, so just try the refresh if you can't see it straight away, because obviously we've made a change on another computer and this is yet to update that information. So by pressing refresh, it just rereads it in. All right. Okay, so we've joined it to the domain, we've renamed it, and we need to move it to the directors OU. So the easiest way to move this computer object into this directors OU is to actually drag and drop. Easy. And click yes to this morning, and you'll see that inside of here, there's that computer account. Easy peasy. And that's this part done. The next part is we need to create the following users. Okay, so if we look at this, user one is Rachel Jones, and it's part of the Office Admin department. So we'll go to Office Admin, and we'll create a new user, and the username is Rachel, and surname is Jones, and our naming convention in class has always been the first name plus first letter of the first name plus the surname, so R Jones. And in class we've always used the password 1 as its password. You notice that I unchecked this even just by not force of habit, because basically we're not doing this on a live system, so it's very annoying to having to change the passwords all the time. So I unchecked this so it doesn't force me to change my password if I try to log in with her account. I'll click finished. Okay, it's a member of these groups, and I haven't set up any groups specifically for this department or anything just yet. So what I'm going to do is just add it to the groups that's already there. So server operators is actually a built-in group. So if we'll go to the built-in group, built-in container, it's just updating. we might have a server operators group that's already there. So basically these built-in groups are groups which has been predefined with specific set of permissions. Okay, so if you want to read about it, you can double click on it and open up and look at the properties, or you can actually expand this and actually look at the description. Okay, the members can administer domain servers. So let's actually do this. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can go to user, go into right-clicking and selecting properties, go into the members of tab and adding the server operators. So I could just type a few letters and I can click check names, and assuming that there's no other groups or objects with those few letters in there, it will automatically populate with the name you want. Okay, or you can just type it in, or you can actually browse for it by using the advanced and finding it. So this way is fine, and that's the preferred way I like to do it. And the next one is Phoebe Reynolds, and that's part of the finance department. Okay, so we might create a new user here. Phoebe Reynolds, P Reynolds, and again I'm gonna not force myself to change the password. I'm gonna set the password to password 1, and I'm gonna leave it at that. So if you look at this, Phoebe Reynolds is also a server operator. So I'll show you a second way of doing that. So if we find the group this time, server operators group, I can double click on it to open up the properties, and we can look at the members. You can see there's Rachel from what we added before, and we can also add, in this case, P Reynolds. There you go. So if I've got a few specific objects with starting with PR, and I'll actually go and choose that specific one, which is Phoebe Reynolds user account. And that's the second way of adding a user to a group. All right, the third one is a Joey Bruce, which is a director. So I'll go to the directors, I'll create a new user, Joey Bruce, and J Bruce is his username. Again, password 1 is his password. Next, finished. All right, finally, we might create these other groups a little bit later. So just having an understanding of what we need to do from a point of view of permissions. Okay, so we'll go back and create those groups. So we'll leave them just for now. But the one thing I did forget to do is that I didn't actually make each of these users have a home directory on the C homes. Okay, I can go back and do that right now. So you got to understand that a home directory is a directory that follows the user to every computer. It's a map drive. Okay, if it's a map drive, it must be available over the network. So if you remember, there's the home folder, but we have not done anything to make it available over the network just yet. In order to make this folder available over a network, we must do what's called sharing. So we can right click, we can select properties, we can go to the sharing tab, advanced sharing, share this folder, go to permissions, and we'll share with full control to everyone. We do this because we then will lock it down with NTFS permissions, and when we combine NTFS and shared permissions together, the most restrictive permission wins. All right, if I actually put in the shared path, which is called a UNC, I can type / the server name and then the share name. You can see there's home. Okay, and if we enter that, that's basically, if we look at that, we go back to our C drive, Zal homes, you can see it's the same place. I'll delete that file now. All right, so now we can go back to our users and we can actually modify them with a home directory. So we go to profiles and we'll go to home folder, we'll connect,
So it's going to be a home drive, which is going to connect to a network source. So again, that path is .unc / server name, in this case server 1, share name, which is home, and then we want each person to have a specific home folder, a different home folder from each other. So I can use the variable username, %username%, which basically means it's going to substitute that variable with wherever the username that the user has at that point that we use it. So I'm going to copy this, because if I actually click OK to that and I go to Phoebe Reynolds, I can do the same thing, select H drive, and now I can just paste it in. And I'll go back and do it one more time with Rachel, connect to the H drive and paste it in. How do I know this has all worked? If I actually, well, first of all, I didn't get any error messages, and second of all, if I go to the homes folder, you can see that these folders get created automatically for those specific users. So that's this part done. All right, so let's continue on. So let's go to part 3. So inside your folder with your surname, create the following folder structure. So it's fairly straightforward. So under your surname, there's a folder called data. So we'll create it called data. And under data, there's common. And if we look at, there's a directors folder. And if we keep on the same level, there's a finance folder. And there's also office admin folder. You notice I use I use underscore again. That saves a little bit of complication when I'm using it in a script or command. All right, so under directors, there's a folder called reports. Under finance, there's a budget folder. And there's also a invoices folder. We'll go up one level again. Under office administration, there's a new employee data and a new employee forms. And flyers and documents. Brochures. And to be honest, I'm sort of breaking my own rules here. So if you remember, I said that spaces would cause some problems with scripts and commands. So to be honest, I shouldn't have used those spaces. So I can go back in and just change the name slightly to get rid of the spaces. And also, this one has, it's even worse. It's got spaces and the ampersand symbol, and that can be very problematic. So I might just change it to that. All right, so if I go here, I just quickly check, give it another check, and you can see I've basically created that folder structure. So I'm just going to quickly get rid of that. So if I actually have a look at this, share the data folder, it says. Okay, so we can go up one step and share this data folder. So this is the top level share. So basically everything's going to be mapped from this point onwards. All right, so I'm going to share it, and I'm going to share a full control to everyone, and that's how I share everything. And then I use the AGDLP and NTFS permissions to lock it down.
All right. If we read this, administrators have full control to all folders. Okay, that's great. That's easy enough. And to be honest, that's one of the default permissions. If I look at the security tab, you can see that administrators has full control to everything already by default. So really we need to understand at that point that that's something that's there by default. If we go back here again, it says, so this one really is done for us because it's there by default. So we're going to color it in. Users in the directors department can modify permissions for all folders. Okay, so basically that means that someone who's in the directors department can modify permissions for all folders. So there and we can see that all folders are underneath the data. So we're referring to every folder in that picture. So everything's underneath that data. So to actually work out where we apply the permissions, we go to the highest level that's common and we apply it there, and using inheritance, it will flow all the way down. All right, and the next line, we might not go to the next line, we might do this right now. So directors. So first of all, according to the AGDLP, we need a global group. So let's right click, new, global group, global security group. And I'm going to denote this by using the GG underscore, just to show you it's a global group. And we're going to call it directors. Okay, so this global group represents the type of user. In this case, it's a director type. We might create just outside of there a new group, but in this case, a domain local group. And so we're going to call it DL underscore, and this denotes where it's going to be applied. So in this case, data is going to be applied to the data folder, and the permissions. If you look at that, it's going to be modify. So basically the access level. So if we actually do that, and who needs modify to the data folder, we can add the GG directors to member of this DL data modify. And now we can go back to the file system, go to the data folder, which we worked out was the highest level that this group needs modified to. Okay, because it says it needs directors department need modified to permissions to all folders. And when we're talking about all folders, we're talking about folders in this picture. So the highest level is this data, and if we go to security, and we will edit this, and we will add the DL data modify, and then give it the modify. When we say modify, it means modify and everything below it, permissions, and that is AGDLP. Okay, so the user, Joey Bruce, is inside a global group called directors. The global group directors is in a domain local group called data DL data M, which stands for modify, and we've applied it to the data folder. So really that is done at this stage. The next one, it says users in the Office admin department needs modify permissions to all folder under Office administration. Okay, so that means that they don't need access, they don't need modify access to anything that's above Office administration, but they need it from Office administration down. So the highest level in that case for this permission is the Office administration folder. So we'll go back to our Active Directory again. We'll go to Office administration, and we'll create our global group. So GG underscore Office admin group, and we'll make the members Rachel Jones, and we'll go here and we'll create a domain local group. So DL underscore off admin modify, and we'll put GG Now there's two global groups. I would choose the Office Admin group. I'll click OK, and I'll go back to this folder and I'll right click security, and I'll add the DL Office Admin M and give it a modifier at this level. All right, so that is this part done. The next part says users in the finance department needs modified to the finance folder. So it's sort of similar. So we'll go to the finance, we'll create a group, we'll call it GG underscore finance. And we'll go out here and we'll create a new domain local group, DL underscore finance. I spelled that wrong. Modify. Okay, and obviously I would create as many domain local groups as I need. Just checking that the members are correct. No members here yet, so I'll add Phoebe and member of. So this is another way of adding it. I'm adding this global group to this domain local group. And I've done that. All right, so now I go back to the folder, and at this point in time, we'll go back to the security, and I'll edit, and I'll add the DL finance with modify. All right, so that's done. So they're fairly straightforward, but the next part is a little bit interesting. Okay, so users in the Office Administration and Finance Department needs write access to the common folder. So obviously I've already got global groups that represent Office Administration and Finance, so I don't need to create any more global groups. But I do not have a domain local group that's specifically for giving write access to this common folder. So I'll do that. So I'll create a new group, DL underscore common write access. Okay, that's a domain local group, and I'll go here and who do we need it in it? We need Office Administration. So GG Office Administration. I can press the Control key down and also select Finance. I'll click OK, and they're both our members now. I'll go back to the common folder. I go to Properties. I go to Security. I edit. And I add the DL common write, and I will give this write permissions. Write plus everything below write. And that's how I tackle this one. And I'll cross that out. So you notice that each work group should not access any other work groups folders. So that means that we do not want anyone to be able to look into these if they're not given permission specifically. Okay, so if we investigate this, we can see that, hey, there's a users group that's got read and execute. Okay, that basically means anyone with an Active Directory account. So we really don't want to have that. So we want to remove that. So we'll go to Advanced, and that's actually the users are receiving these permissions through inheritance. So we'll have to go to Advanced, Disable Inheritance, and we'll convert the permissions into explicit permissions. What does that mean? That means that we'll keep all those permissions there, but instead of being inherited permissions, now they will be explicit, which means that I can actually go in and get rid of users. And I'll do the same thing for all of these things. So Advanced, Disable Inheritance, Convert, OK, Edit, Users, Remove. OK. And obviously this is just repeating the same thing a few times because we do not want anyone to go into these folders unless they've been given permissions, and that's what that last point is. And finally, Office Admin. All right, and edit, users, remove. All right, so that's really done. So we've done that and we've done that now according to the AGDLP. And to be honest, we've done all of this now because we've added the AGDLP and the groups and added these users as members as part of that. All right, so we've done that now. So the next part is the fault tolerance. It says add RAID 1 solution to your boot partition. Yeah, boot and the system partition. Okay, so this may take a bit of time. So in order to actually add RAID 1, we need a minimum of 2 hard drives. Right now, you can see my virtual machine's only got 1 hard drive. So what I need to do is actually shut down my server. And I need to modify my virtual machine so it has a second hard drive. Bear with me for a second while this shuts down. Here we go. We'll edit the virtual machine settings. We'll add, and we'll click yes. We'll add a hard drive. It's a SCSI hard drive. It's a brand new virtual disk, and we will store as a single file, but 60 gigs is fine for our purposes, and we might just rename this RAID 1. Just so we know that the disk is for RAID 1. Okay, so we'll click OK to that, and we'll power the server back on. All right, we'll log in now. Password 2, because I've changed my password. And now we will launch our disk manager to add the RAID 1. So I don't need to use the server manager for this, for any of the storage pool activities. We'll use the server manager, but for just this RAID 1, I will add using disk manager. So if you notice, I right clicked on my start button and chose disk manager. So you can see there it is. It's offline right now. There's an extra hard drive. I can see it's right there, 60 gigs. It's offline. So what I need to do is right click on it and select online first of all. And second of all, I need to initialize it. So that's the disk I want, and I'll initialize it. And thirdly, I need to convert it to a dynamic disk. You can't do RAID volumes, RAID 1 or RAID 5 volumes with just a basic disk. So I'm going to convert both disks, disk 0 and disk 1, to dynamic disks, and I'll convert. All right. So right now, I can add a mirror. So I have to do this in order because this is the system reserve is actually the bootable partition. So this is where the boot is, the boot volume. So if I want my server to be bootable in the future, if my disk 0 fails, I need to add a mirror to this. Right click, add mirror, add it to disk 1, which is this disk. And there it is. C drive is where the operating system is, so our server won't actually boot up to Windows if it doesn't have the C drive mirrored. So I'm going to add mirror again. I'm going to put it on disk 1, and I did it in that order because we need the system reserve at the start of the partition. And if you notice, I've got an extra bit of space here. Okay, so I might actually create a new simple volume, and we might just call it F drive. We might go back and we'll call this backups. Finished. Okay, so right now it's obviously, if it's mirrored, it means it has to have this exact same copy of data that's on C drive on this new C drive. And this, because our C drive actually contains about 10 gigs of information, that's going to take a bit of time to copy over. So right now, at this point in time, because this is a sample practical test, I'm gonna remove the mirror so I'm not wasting time doing that sync. Okay, this is relatively small, and you can see that's synced correctly. So that means I've actually removed the mirror for the C drive, so it won't be redundant when if it actually fails. But I think to demonstrate creating a mirror, that's fine. I'm just not finishing with the synchronization because that actually takes a bit of time, and it may make my computer run slow because of the synchronization. So that's this part done. The next part is to do a backup of the system state on a daily basis to somewhere. It doesn't specify, so I'm going to put it here. So I'm going to close the mirror. I'm going to install backups, add remove features, next. I think it's a feature, so which will go next, and we'll go to Windows backups, and we'll install that feature. So bear with me, we just have to wait for the feature to be fully installed before we can actually create any schedules. There we go, it's all done. So relatively quickly, we'll go to Tools, scroll right down to the bottom. There's the Windows backup. So it says it says schedule a daily backup. So what we're going to do is go to Local Backups. And obviously in real life, you will not back up your server to a local hard drive. You might back it up to a network drive. You may back it up to the cloud. You may back it up to a removable media, such as a tape drive, USB, etc. But for this purpose, we're going to back it up to our drive. So backup schedule. Next, what do we want to back up? It says system state. So if you remember system state, so system state is not everything, so I'm going to choose custom. If you remember, the system state is basically the registry, the Active Directory, as well as the system settings. So I'm going to choose just the system state. I could have many other options as well, but I'm choosing the system state because that's where it wants me to back up. So next, when do I want to back it up? It says once a day. It does say daily. When should I back it up? I might back it up at sometime like 2 a.m. in the morning. It should be a quiet time for the server, and also it ensures they won't run right now. And where should I place the backups? Well, I can put on a dedicated hard drive that's for this purpose, or I can choose to back up to a volume. In this case, I've got a volume, so I'm going to back up to the volume. I'm going to add, there's my F drive, and I'm going to click finish. And basically that's my schedule completed, and I'll close that. Okay, so system state to the F drive every day at 2 a.m. Done. Next part is DHCP server. So I'm going to set my computer up as a DHCP server, but obviously we know that VMware Workstation also has a DHCP server for the host-only networks, so that it can easily allocate IP addresses. But so this is going to conflict with our DHCP server. So we are going to disable the VMware DHCP server. So we'll go to Edit, Virtual Network Editor. We're going to change the settings. We're going to click Yes. We are going to select the VMnet 1, which is where our host-only network is in this case. So host-only. And we're going to, it might be ticked like this. We're going to untick it. So when it's unticked, there's no DHCP server on this VMware Workstation for VMnet 1. All right, mine was already disabled, so mine's fine. So I'll click OK to that anyway, and it's good. The next thing is, so I've done this part. The next thing is I'm going to configure DHCP server. In order to do that, I have to install the Active Directory, the DHCP server role. Here we go, and it's the DHCP server there. Add features, next, and install. Okay, so this is a DHCP role. So bear with me as it installs it. Shouldn't take too long. Okay, while it's installing it, let's review what we have to configure. We have to configure a DHCP range between 192.168.20.101 to 192.168.20.200. So that's the IP addresses are going to come from that range. It's going to have a subnet mask of a Class C subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. It's going to have a scope option for the DNS server, which is 192.168.20.2, and it's also going to have a gateway configured, even though we don't have a gateway. So I'm going to click close to this, and now I'm going to launch the DHCP server from the tools. And right now there's nothing configured, and this server is actually not working. So it's all down arrows. So if I actually right click on, expand that first, then right click, we're going to select new scope. A scope is a DHCP configuration. So next, we're going to call it the 5ICW sample test scope. Okay, we can put a description we wanted to. We can just copy and paste in there. We can leave it empty if we want to as well. The starting IP address, so it relates to this range, 192.168.20.101, and the end of this range is 192.168.20.200. So, and the subnet mask is a Class C, which uses 24 bits for the subnet mask, and that's correct. Any exclusions? Well, it doesn't ask us to do any exclusions, so we won't do any. The default lease time is 8 hours, and it hasn't, the requirements hasn't specified any different, so we'll leave it as that. And it asks, do we want to configure some of the common options? And in this case, yes, I will, because first of all, the default gateway, that's required. So I will put in the default gateway. Make sure you click add. If you don't add it at this point, it won't actually be part of the settings. Next, the DNS server, it's already there. The parent suffix there, even though it's not asking us to do it, we'll leave it there. And NetBIOS or Win server, no one uses a Win server these days anymore, so we'll bypass this. And do you want to activate the scope? Activate the scope basically means turning it on. And yes, I do. And I'll click finished. All right, you notice that the arrows, it's still down, isn't it? So the red arrow next to it, that's because this DHCP server is not yet authorized. Authorized means it's actually allowed to give out IP addresses in the Active Directory, because there might be many DHCP servers, and if we give out differing information, it can cause a real problem. So I'm going to right click on this and authorize this DHCP server, and if I press F5, you notice that it changes to green. All right, so I've done this now, and it says ensure that Windows 7 VM is receiving its IP addressing information from the DHCP server. Really, it's specifying the Windows 10. So if we go back to the Windows 10 and we'll log in, it doesn't matter if we're logging in as the administrator or the local administrator. We just have to be able to configure the settings. So we'll go here, we'll go to the properties, and we'll go to TCP IP properties. Instead of using a static IP address like we did before, we're going to choose to obtain automatically. And basically when we click OK or close to that, it should be broadcasting out to get an IP address. It's going to go through the DHCP DORA process and hopefully get an IP address if we've done everything correctly. I can see that it's got w2k16ad.local already, so maybe that's a good sign. If I double click on this and click on the details, you can see DHCP enabled. Yes. It's getting an IP address. Yes. But is it in our range? Yes. Does it have the right subnet mask? Yes. The lease is obtained today and expires in 8 hours time. The gateway and the DNS server are correct. So it's basically getting all those information that we spoke about just before correctly. So that just ensures that we know, we can see it's working. All right, let's go back to the server. Okay, the next part says configure a Cname. So if you're not sure what a Cname is, that's actually an alias. Okay, so basically that's a DNS thing. So remember how we just put in www.hotmail.com, it doesn't actually mean that the server, that the Hotmail server is actually called www. www is an alias, so it's another name for something, or another Cname for something, canonical name for something. So to create a Cname, in this case, create a Cname for the domain controller called DC. So which computer is the domain controller? Well, it's server 1. That's this computer here. And now we need to create a Cname. So in this white space, we're going to create a new alias or Cname. And the Cname is going to be called DC. So DC is going to be another name for this server 1. So what is this? DC is this another name for what? Well, I can type it in here, or I can click Browse, go to for lookup, go to my domain, and choose server 1, and it types it in for me. I like doing it that way because there's no typos. Okay, there's no typos. Or I can just simply type it in if I'm confident with my typing skills. I'll click OK to that, and we'll switch over to our Windows 10 while we have it, and we'll start a command prompt, and we'll use the ns lookup command. NS lookup stands for name server lookup, and we're going to look up dc.w2k16 ad.local, and if our Cname is working correctly, it will tell me that DC is the alias for server 1, which has this IP address, and that shows me it's working correctly. All right, so that's this part done. All right, up to our last part, which is creating a HyperV machine for out of server 2. So if you remember, when we created a HyperV, because we're doing virtualization, there's a little bit of actual tweaking we need to do to the virtual machine before it can become a virtual machine, a HyperV virtual machine inside of VMware. So that's virtualization inside of virtualization. So we will open up a worksheet here, and we'll put this on the left-hand side. And right now I'm gonna have a look, show you the section that I'm talking about. So this is creating the clone. In this case, we don't need to create the clone. It's already done. It's called server 2. If you do need to do it, make sure you sysprep it. All right, so it's adding the extra network adapters, but really the most important thing is where we actually change some of the VMware settings to make sure that it actually can be a Hyper-V. So let me just find that for you. So that's where we were editing the VMX file. All right, so here it is. This is where we start. So first of all, let's open up our server 2 in our not turning it on, but in our VMware workstation. I'll edit it. So now I'm going to go to my settings. It specifically goes to the processor setting, and it's saying give it 2 processors and 2 processor cores. This is just so we can have the virtual machines in Hyper-V having more than one processor or seeing more than one processor. Also here, this is probably the important part, we need to change it to Intel VT AMD RVI. So this basically allows us to manually tell the CPU to be able to handle or pass through these instructions. We'll choose this virtual Intel VT EPT, and also what we're going to do is we're going to click OK to that, but we also need to edit the VMX file. So we'll go to our Windows Explorer, we'll go inside of server 2, and we'll find the VMX file. You notice that in my view, I've actually got file extensions checked, so which means I can see that's a VMX file. So I'll right click on this and I'll edit with Notepad++. And really, I don't want to worry about this. So here's my, cancel that. Here's my Notepad++, and really at this point in time, I just need to use my instructions worksheet and just add this line here. Okay, so this line should go somewhere after this line, to be honest, 54. And it says type it in, don't copy and paste it, because if you copy and paste it, there's a chance, sorry, I can't talk and type at the same time. There's a chance if you copy and pasting it, you get a character that is not recognizable in this Notepad++ or a text editor, because don't forget you're copying from a Word, which is a markup text editor, to an ASCII editor. So it's hypervisor CPUID.v0 equals, it's the quotation marks that sometimes can make a have a problem. False. And you can see that I've got the 2 quotation marks there. And that looks about right. Just give it a once over, and obviously we'll know if it's wrong when we actually try to install the Hyper-V role. So right now it's not saved. We need to make sure it is saved before we can continue. And we'll minimize this now. And we'll go back to our server 2 and we'll power it on. All right, so it's turning on with hopefully all those settings correctly. It should already be part of the domain already, I think. I forgot to check that the snapshots. Okay, so let me have a look at the snapshot manager. Yes, if it's in that snapshot, it should be part of the domain. What I should have done was reset it to the snapshot beforehand. So I'm gonna log in with the domain administrator. So when you're working with a server, another server that's not a domain controller inside, who is a member of the domain, try to always use the domain administrator, because you have not just powers over this one machine, you have powers across the whole domain. So it should be password 2, just like the domain administrator we used on server 1, because it is the same account. Last time it didn't turn off properly, and that's what's happening here. So let me, bear with me. I'm just going to readjust the window size, and I'll cancel this. Okay, so I'm going to add the Hyper-V role, and this is where we'll know whether or not our changes were correct. So we're going to click Hyper-V, click Add Features, and we're going to go Next, Next, Next. And basically there's only one infinite in this case, and that's going to be the one that's connected to the physical, or physical as far as this virtual machines on this machine knows. Allow receive live migration. We've only got one Hyper-V server in this, so it doesn't matter if we check that or not. This is the default locations of where the virtual machines or virtual disks will be kept, and leaving it by default for the purposes of this test is fine. And install. We'll restart this server. All right, it's finally restarted. Now I'll log in again as a domain administrator. And I will launch the HyperV Manager from here. So here we go. And HyperV Manager can be installed on another computer if we wanted to, but we can also use it from the computer with the Hyper-V on there. So here it is, server 2 is our Hyper-V server. We can actually go new, virtual machine, and we can call this sample test VM if we wanted to. It's not specific. It doesn't specify a specific name. Generation 1 or 2, and there's obviously generation 2 has newer features. It supports 64-bit operating systems. It supports UEFI-based firmware. Next, amount of memory, startup memory, 1 gig. That's probably enough. Is it connected to any networks? I can connect it to its physical network if we wanted to. And the hard drive, we'll call it. We'll let it call it its default name. I can see that I've spelt this sample incorrectly, so I'll go back. And default location for the hard drive is fine. I'll install the operating system later, and I'll finish. Okay, so that's actually done. Okay, that is all that's required for this section of the sample practical test. So right now I've finished all of the requirements for the sample practical test, and obviously along the way I've been explaining what I've been doing. So as you can see, it does not cover every aspect of what we've learned in the course. A clear distinction is we didn't do any of the printing or printing permissions or pooling. We didn't do any reverse lookups in the DNS. We didn't do many other things as well. So this is just a sample practical test. It does not mean that those things will not be in the real test. So make sure you're prepared, and trust me, if you only have a 1.5 hour time to do the actual practical test, you won't have too much time to actually look up every instruction in your worksheets. So you need to have a fairly good idea of how to do most things, and just using the worksheets like I just did just then to refer to specific things where it's too hard to remember the exact procedure. So if I were you, I would have a few goes at doing the sample practical test. Hopefully you not using the worksheets at all towards the end. Use this video to rewind, replay, and redo some of the sections. Okay, so the whole point of the video means you can go back and watch it again and again. So we'll leave it there, and then good luck in the real practice.